Noah Botic and Daniel Arzani were rejected by European football, but their sensational match-winning performances in the elimination finals on the weekend show that returning home to Australia doesn't necessarily mean failure. It's a familiar question for a young Aussie player. When is the right time to go overseas and try your trade in Europe? For many reasons, it can often be out of the player's control that it ends up being the wrong one. But for Arzani and Botic, the decision to come back to Australia and regroup has carried Western United and Melbourne Victory to the A-League semi-finals. We'll break down both of the instant A-League classics that happened on the weekend and preview the semi-finals ahead. Elsewhere, the Australia Cup playoffs are happening up in Darwin this week, with a chance for Michael Valkanis to take his first game as Brisbane Roar coach. A missed offside call in the dub ruins Melbourne City's chances of an invincible season and treble. And international coaching news as Graham Arnold secures a gig in Iraq and Ange Postecoglou becomes the first Australian coach to manage in a European final. On this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. My name is Lachlan Avil, and it is a very special occasion because I'm joined by Jacob Stevens and Christian Montegan. And guys, today is the 200th episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. It's quite a momentous occasion. We've been around, I guess, about 18 months now. I think, Jacob, we've been ticking on at least 2 episodes a week, and a little cool milestone to tick off.
It's flown by, to be honest. Crazy to think as well that, all 3 of us have been involved basically since the start, right? So it's a crazy number to have hit 200. I remember when we hit 100 and we thought that was big. It's awesome. And, the fact that we're still going strong and everybody's still tuning in and listening to us is great as well. So thanks to everybody that tunes in every week as well.
Absolutely. We're nothing without the people that listen to us at home, and a nice little present from you guys was that we got our number 1 week on the podcast platform last week in terms of A-League specific content. So obviously people love it when the Socceroos come to town, but the bulk of what we do is trying to promote the A-League, and you guys have rewarded us for that. So Christian, we're very thankful for all the support we get.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it goes to our consistency, right? I mean, 2 episodes each week. Haven't missed one, right, since the very start, I believe. So it just, I think it's down to that consistency, trying to keep, our fans and the audience informed each week, which I think they appreciate. Well, we hope so anyway. But it's just about getting that content out there and just, sharing news about Australian football, talking about games, talking about the latest news. And that's what we're about essentially. So, we've enjoyed every minute of it, and hopefully we have 200 episodes more, and, obviously more into the future.
Absolutely. Well, we have a little gift for you as well, of course. If you did order one of the lovely Round Ball Australia kits that I'm sporting, as you can see for today's episode, they are on their way out. We received them about mid last week and we distributed them on Friday. So I've had a look at the Australia Post account. I can see that a couple are starting to be delivered around the country. So if you did order, check your emails. You'll have some tracking instructions and delivery instructions in there as well. But they are on the way. So let us know. Send us some photos. We want to see them. Jacob, I'm talking to you too. Get the kit on.
Send some photos of me in it. Yeah,
absolutely. But yes, we thank you to everyone who picked us up. Or picked up a shirt, but let's get into the news of the week. And I really like this angle of how to talk about the weekend. Jacob, Noah Botic and Daniel Arzani, 2 players that have had their tribulations going over to Europe and have come back to Australia. Yep. Noah Botic, his story, a very rated player in his early teens, scored 5 goals in an under-16 Asian Cup, made an under-17 World Cup, and the interest worldwide was pretty significant. He got a trial at Manchester United for a week, eventually gets into the Hoffenheim Academy, apparently even had interest from Bayern Munich, but turned it down. He thought maybe Hoffenheim was a little bit more low-key. And a club where he could maybe just grow into himself a little bit. But COVID kind of wrecked his stint over there. He was unable to see his family. His family was unable to come see him. dealt a really difficult hand, came back to Australia, picks Western United because of John Aloisi and being the infamous Australian striker that he is. And then a few years later in 2025, almost wins the Golden Boot and scores a hat-trick in an elimination final. And then we have Daniel Arzani, who had that breakout season for Melbourne City in 2017, 2018, became the youngest Australian player ever at the time to feature in a World Cup over in Russia, signs for Manchester City, gets his loan to Celtic, and does his ACL within 20 minutes of playing for the senior team. Runs out the rest of his Man City contract with disappointing loan spells across Europe. Returns to Australia through MacArthur and then Victory, and particularly under Tony Popovich as well. And the stats say, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but he's arguably given his best return ever in his career per 90 minutes this season, and created both of the goals away to Western Sydney to take Victory into the semi-finals. It's two really cool stories of redemption. Obviously, Arzani's a little bit older, so there's a slight difference there, but I think it's good to know, and it's encouraging that if young players do go away to Europe and things don't quite work out for them, that's not necessarily the end of things.
No, I think it's about players like realizing within themselves what they need to do to, get their career back on track as well, if that makes sense, right? Like Arzani, I think, is the perfect example of that, where he was the next big thing out of Australia, and everybody was touting him to be, the one who's going to lead the Socceroos on for, the next decade and a half. And then, like you said, does his ACL in, and it sort of puts a spanner in the works there. But he knew that, a good opportunity for him to get back to the form that got him over to Europe in the first place was to come back home and play in the A-League again. It's a level he's familiar with. It's a level that he knows he can compete in. I think that's the sort of thing we didn't necessarily have in the past, where players would head over to Europe and not quite manage to break through, and then it took them a while before they realised that, hang on, maybe I need to reset and I need to reevaluate where I'm at. Whereas I think now we're seeing players make that realisation a little bit earlier and go either that or they stay in Australia for longer, which is another benefit as well. So no, it's all really promising stuff, and I think that what both of these players have done is show the talent that they inherently have and the reasons why they got those opportunities in Europe in the first place. I don't think it's any surprise to have seen Noah Botic on the score sheet in that elimination final. I mean, the fact that it was a hat-trick is very impressive for such a young striker, but he's been scoring goals all season long, so it's hardly surprising. And then Arzani, I thought, was outstanding player of the match, in my opinion, in that game for Melbourne Victory. Just all over the place in that attacking third, just on the ball constantly, creating problems, beating his man one-on-one, putting great balls into the box. It was like that Arzani of old, right? And we've been talking about it all season long, as when are we going to see it truly come out? And we've seen glimpses of it and games where he's looked really good, but then other games where he's looked quite off. But I think in the last, almost sort of since his Socceroos selection, he's just looked very, very good and in strong form consistently. And that's what we want to see from our Australian talents, is these players that are able to make a difference in games consistently. So yeah, I don't think it's any surprise to have seen the pair of them have good games in this elimination final round, but I think that it shows as well that also, perhaps the A-League is starting to increase in terms of its quality as well, that these players can come here and compete, and that they're not always necessarily going to be the best player on the pitch every time that they play. The fact that quality is starting to catch up, and I think that that's a great thing, and that hopefully it means that, like I said, young players, they either stay in Australia longer, realizing it's a good development opportunity, or if, things don't work out for them elsewhere, that there's always a home back here where, it's a good level, and you've got players who, like your Arzanis, your Botiches, who come back and can make a name for themselves again. So I'd be surprised to see, especially Noah Botic in the A-League next season. But yeah, the pair of them, fantastic players, and I think it's a really good sign for Australian football.
I think, Christian, clearly the two best players on each respective field for me on the weekend, and just showing their strengths to the absolute utmost, right? You got Daniel Arzani, whose strength has always been, creativity, whether that be through dribbling, which we saw for the second goal, pretty much danced around two players. I know I loved using that term. I think Macca cracked it out on the commentary as well, little dancing feet, Daniel Arzani, and providing the ball, which got knocked to Teague and then Mashash for the winner. But then the first one as well, to find the vision of the pass over to Boss, which gave him time enough to take a poor touch touch and still put away the goal. And then Noah Botic, who on the converse, the goals created weren't from, a lot of silky build-up from Western, but almost all three of them had like 2 or 3 deflections off Adelaide United players, and he just found himself in that one particular moment with an opportunity to shoot, and he buried it 3 times and set his team up. So they're both showing their strengths to a T. And, when you have players of such quality and their strengths are really shining, they win games of football and really clutch games of football as well.
I'm not too sure if you guys saw Daniel Garb's tweet. I think it was on match day. He basically said he's still shocked that people are questioning Arzani's talent. And there were a few comments saying, we're not questioning his talent, we're questioning his consistency, right? Like, it's all well and good doing this after that Socceroos call-up where Popovic essentially called him out and said, look, you haven't been good enough, but I'm still going to select you because obviously we've got that good bond from our time at Victory. But like, now is the time you have to step up. You really have to perform. And since that moment, Arzani has really, lifted this Victory side. He's, taken on the mantle, and it's not a case of has he got the talent or not. Like, that's undeniable. He does, but he's got to string these games together, right? Once he does that, then, we can start having this conversation about him making that move overseas. And the same for Botic, right? Although it's been a great season for him at West United, scoring all these goals, and his movement off the ball is terrific. I mean, I thought in that game against Adelaide, like, the defenders were so lost at times because when you're marking a player like Botic, it's a nightmare, right? Because he's not standing still. He's trying to move you around, drag you around side to side. He's one of those types of players who's very difficult to mark. So if they can keep, performing week in, week out, then again, he's another one who's going to get a call overseas. But I think at the end of the day, it just goes to show how difficult it is to sustain yourself in Europe, right? I mean, like, these two players, right, have sort of had their opportunities, especially Arzani, and then obviously having to revert back to the A-League, which, yes, it is a pathway, back to try to get to Europe again. But at the same time, you don't want that, right? You want to keep your level at the highest possible, benchmark in Europe and stay there, right? You don't want to have this back and forth scenario where, you keep getting recycled, essentially. I know it's sort of a harsh term, but that's the reality of it. So, look, these players have got talent, right? There's no question. It's just, can they, build that consistency? That's always been the main question, and not just these two players, but a lot of players in the league, right? So, it's all well and good that, yes, they're performing, they're helping their team, get over the line. Can they take that next level and do it in a manner which, it can get them regular Socceroos call-ups, and Popovic doesn't have these questions in his mind to say, okay, does this player deserve it? Am I going to get criticised for selecting this player? So, especially Botic, I mean, he's put his hand up, hasn't he, for a Socceroos call-up. I think in the next international window, if he doesn't get called up, then, I think a lot more questions are going to be asked compared to last window. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think Papa would be crazy not to pick Botic in his current form. I think this whole situation goes to prove a couple of things as well. Number one, and I know that Botic is yet to have his real proper crack at Europe. That's going to come next season. But number one, that development isn't linear, right? And it's not linear necessarily with age or club progression, what league you're playing in. It can go up and down, and there's different things that will affect different players in different ways. Yeah. And especially for these two players, that factor has been the coaching. And the second point is how much coaching can have an impact on a player's development. Obviously, Arzani coming into Melbourne Victory under Tony Popovic, there was a real hard line drawn there in terms of how much defensive responsibility he's had, and his numbers on that end have increased significantly ever since he transferred to Victory, and becoming a more well-rounded player and a lot more disciplined, and that's really helped him in converting himself into more of a well-rounded footballer. And if you know a Botic and you're coming back to the A-League, of all the top Australian strikers, I don't think there's too many properly involved in Australian coaching at the moment. You think of the likes of a Timmy Cahill, who's over with Qatar at the moment, Mark Viduka, who I'm pretty sure is like running a coffee shop in Croatia or something like that. It's like there's not too many big options, right? So to have John Aloisi there, he's been there for 4 years now. Every day you go on a training and you're learning off one of the best Australian strikers we've ever seen. That's a really great place for him to be nurtured, and we've seen the benefit of that as well. And now we're coming into a crucial time, which, as you say, Jacob, Seb, both of these players are off contract. So Noah Botic, we've heard whispers of Christian. An outlet called Kicker is saying that St. Pauli, Jackson Irvine and Connor Metcalf's team in the Bundesliga, who are just 3 points above relegation with 3 games to play, are eyeing off Botic. So that would be a move straight to potentially a top 5 European league. And Daniel Arzani as well. Is there a club overseas that is willing to take another punt on him? He's obviously shown a lot of quality this season, and he'd be a really great asset for Melbourne Victory to keep. But I'm sure he has ambitions of going over and giving Europe another crack as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think firstly, St. Pauli would be a great destination for Botic to really develop his craft with, 2 fellow Socceroos players, as you mentioned, to try, settle in, because we've seen in the past, right, players move to whatever club it is and they sort of struggle to adapt to, their surroundings, the environment. If you've got 2 players, you essentially not, I guess, know off by heart because they haven't really played together for the Socceroos, albeit that could be different come June, the next international window. But, to be, I guess, nurtured with those experienced types of players, I think it'd do him a world of good, with his first real, shot at Europe, like you touched on before, Lockie. So I think definitely to play in a top 5 league in Europe, that's the goal, right? That's the aim, that's the benchmark you have to aspire towards. And I mean, for Arzani, it's a bit different because, yes, he made that move to Celtic a few years ago. Didn't quite work out. But look, I think a lot of that had to do with injuries more than anything else. He got extremely lucky. I mean, I think from memory, he did an ACL once or twice whilst he was over there. And once you get that sort of injury, it's very hard to recover from, right? You've got other players waiting behind you, waiting to take their opportunity. And from there, essentially, you've got to start from scratch, right? So I think for Arzani, he'll be looking at it as, a second chance at, playing just for any sort of European club, whether it be a top 5 European league or the Scottish league, whatever the case may be. I think he's going to try and hopefully grab it with both hands, because perhaps he's at this stage of his career where, now he's made that second stint in the A-League. He's played here. He's realised, okay, look, if this doesn't work out in my next move, if I do get the chance in Europe, then potentially it could be curtains, right? You never know how many opportunities or doors open, right? So hopefully that's the mindset and the mentality he's going in with. But look, from the seasons that they've been having, I'd be shocked if they didn't have, multiple call-ups from clubs in the off-season.
So, Jacob, I think obviously Botic is the obvious one. He's had too much clear return on his season with the amount of goals he scored to be ignored, and whispers from a Bundesliga team mean that there's going to be plenty of clubs below that will be interested in him as well. Arzani is the more line ball decision, and there was a really well-timed, to be honest, article from Jake Rosengarten for aleagues.com.au talking about the data probably underlying Arzani's season. We know he's obviously never been quite like that elite level goal scorer, which according to this statistical package that he used, Traits Insight, which is an analytics platform used by a lot of Europe's big clubs, he falls slightly below average in the A-League in terms of goal scoring ability. But in terms of creating, passing and defending, which are the other key main categories in his, for wingers, he is like significantly above, and he's ranked as the top Australian attacking midfielder. And I know some people will be more into these stats than others, but this system has him ranked as a better player than what he had in that Melbourne City breakout season. So if that was the season that, attracted Manchester City, I know there's the Melbourne City link there as well, of course, but to get that kind of move then, he is apparently a better player than he was back then. So if he's off contract and there are, obviously he can go anywhere, there's no issue with transfer fee or anything like that, then the numbers are suggesting that he could be a really good pickup for someone overseas.
Yeah, I think numbers obviously always have to be taken with a grain of salt. We've seen this Paramount Player Index, and they've announced their team of the season, which is, oh boy, they're missing some big players there. But, I think that what it does well, and I think what Jake did so well in this article is use those figures to back up what you can see when you watch him play, if that makes sense. It's not using it to try and justify anything. It's using it to go, this is why he's playing so well. It's like, it's just confirming what we kind of already knew. And the fact that it's higher than his City year, it's not massively surprising. I think what he's really added, and you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, Lockie, is that defensive side to his game that he maybe didn't have as much back then, and that's a huge part of being a well-rounded player and a system player in football nowadays, is being able to defend even as an attacking player. So look, it's been a tremendous season for him, and while I think it's going to be I don't want to say it's unlikely he makes a move to Europe, but I think it would be silly for Victory not to do everything in their power to try and keep him around, because he's just that sort of a player where if you can keep him for a year or two, he could just increases your chances of winning so significantly. And I mean, we've seen that right in both in this elimination final and throughout the season, that he's been really one of their key playmakers when others haven't necessarily stepped up. And I think that it's going to be difficult for him to secure a move to Europe, just because I think there are going to be questions over things like his injury history and his longevity and, his history in Europe and stuff like that, where he hasn't necessarily performed well. Add to the fact that, at least as far as I'm aware, I've not heard or seen any rumours linking him anywhere. But it wouldn't be undeserved if he did get a move. And I think that it would be good both for him. I think it would be good for Australian football as well, because it seems like he's going to be a Socceroo for the foreseeable future, right? Especially with Tony Popovic at the helm. He really likes him and uses him in interesting ways. So I think a move overseas and a chance to compete against higher quality opposition, it's going to be great for him. So if that is what happens, then good for him. And, maybe a few other clubs in the league are going to be, breathing a sigh of relief that they don't have to deal with him again next season, but we'll wait and see. Obviously, he's off contract, anything could happen. He could come back to the Victory, and like I said, I think they'd be silly not to do everything they could to keep him. But no, best of luck to him if he does secure that move overseas, because I think he's shown again that he has that quality to be able to go over and make an impact and be a really, really high quality player. Okay, yes, he's maybe a couple of years behind the curve in that regard because of his injury and the sort of failed stint in Europe, but he's shown that he's still got that something, right? He's got that it factor about him where when he's on the ball, you just feel like something's going to happen. And you don't get that very often from players. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens. And if Europe comes calling, I hope he takes the opportunity with both hands because, he's a very talented player.
All right, let's dive a little bit deeper into the games themselves. We'll start with Melbourne Victory's 2-1 win over the Western Sydney Wanderers on Saturday night. Christian, it felt for me, with this Melbourne Victory team, you often never know what you're going to get when they rock up to a certain game, right? But especially off the back of the Newcastle comparison last week, this was such a professional game, I thought. They defended so resolutely. They sat off a little bit more than usual, which was a deliberate tactic that Arthur Diller's talked about post-game to put the Wanderers in an uncomfortable situation of having a lot of the ball and not giving them too many opportunities in transition. The goal that they did concede for me was just Josh and Sarah, the young right back, hasn't played too much football this year, chasing Zach Sapsford across the line when he probably shouldn't have and playing him onside. And you got to remember as well that this Western Sydney Wanderers side is clearly the best attacking team in the competition and is 12 games unbeaten. So if you're only conceding one goal and probably by an individual error as well, then it feels like you've done a good job. And it feels like Diller's won the tactical battle there. He just managed to stifle the Wanderers where they usually feel so strong. And that really felt like the platform to allow the likes of, Arzani, Valuplay, Mashash to do their thing further up the field.
Is that why Dillis and Stajic had that bit of a blow-up after the match? Stajic was a bit annoyed that Dillis got the tactical edge over him because, I think as the game wore on, I thought, okay, if Victory are to win this game, are they going to be good enough to beat Auckland over two legs considering, their up and down form? You don't know what you're going to get from them. Like, I think this game in particular showed how mature and resolute they can be. Right, and I think if they take that into the semi-finals, they're going to be really dangerous, I think, because I think throughout the whole 90 minutes, you saw, like you said, Lockie, just, tweaked tactics here and there, sat a bit deeper when they needed to, absorb the pressure, press numbers forward, only at moments when they knew that, okay, they've got a chance to really put the Wanderers defence under a lot of pressure, including the midfielders as well. So, that went down to Tegan Valadon, who I thought did exceptionally well again in the midfield. And I think when this team's on, they're on, right? It's just a case of, can they do it until the end of the season? That's been the big concern, right? And, it's fair to have these questions because, you've had a coach in Patrick Kisnorbo who's left after a few rounds. Like, that wasn't in the script. If he was here, then I don't know, potentially it might have been a different story. So for Victory to turn around this form as quickly as they have, I mean, some of us were predicting that they wouldn't even make finals because it was this long stretch of form where it felt as though, the wheels are starting to fall off. The players aren't really buying into what Dillis is trying to implement on the field. But I thought this game against the Wanderers, a very good Wanderers side who were very efficient in front of goal, to sort of neutralise them to that one goal, which was, let's be honest, it was avoidable. I think heading into this Auckland game, they're going to have some real confidence about them, and rightly so.
You mentioned the coaching situation there. I think rightly as well, because they had this exceptional run under PK. I think 7 games in the league, if my memory serves me correctly. They come in, Arthur Dillis does, and it was winless in the next 6 games, and all of a sudden that terrific start to the season turned on its head. But he has turned it around, and he's done well. And for me, the change that I noticed most looking at this game to how PK played when he was there is they had this one very rigid system. And not necessarily the system itself was rigid, but they played one way, and that was pretty much it. And Casey Boss, who scored in this game as well, he was pretty much exclusively a left winger when Victory had the ball under PK. And, Jason Guerrier, who was right back at the time, would slot across. They'd play 3 at the back, and Piscopo, who was starting at left wing, would always tuck inside. They still do that, and that's how Casey Boss scored his goal here. But there were other times as well where they recognised that wasn't the best thing to do, and Nishan Velupoli would be one-on-one out on the left wing, and they'd, Daniel Arzani coming off the right had so much more licence to just roam wherever he wanted. And I think the versatility of allowing the players, Jacob, the freedom to kind of judge the game a little bit more on feel and determine whether the right strategy is right in a particular moment has served them to great effect in this game. And it's one of the reasons why Dillis has managed to turn it around in the final dozen or so games in the season. And he's leading a very confident Melbourne Victory side now into a semi-final.
Yeah, and part of the reason why they were able to have that sort of freedom is because they just immediately off the bat won the midfield battle. And the Wanderers couldn't get a foothold at all in that central third. And I mean, we've been saying it about Victory all season long, right? Their midfield's one of the best in the leagues, and they showed it again here, where, Wanderers, all they could really do after about 20 minutes was just try and play direct and get in behind. That then allowed that freedom of players to move about more, a bit higher up the pitch for the Victory and try and exploit some space and probe into the Wanderers' defence, and it worked to great effect. So, no, look, I think that Dillis has he's nailed it in this game for sure. And I think that, we look back and power of hindsight and all that, but that early stretch he had where he was poor, probably just getting used to the players and, what he wants to do and how he thinks they're going to be best used, because there was a while where he did some stuff that was quite similar to what Kisnorbo was doing. There was some stuff he did in that stretch that was very, very different. And it seems like he's sort of settled into, like you've mentioned, Lockie's kind of compromise where there's little bits that are similar with that left winger coming inside and Casey Boss getting wide and high in possession sometimes. But then there are other times, like you mentioned, where he'll shift things around and structure the team differently out of possession if it's needed. And I think it's that versatility that's really come to Victory's aid in the back end of this season, where they found this form and they're playing good football. But yeah, like I think honestly it's that midfield that just keeps them in those games, because when a team literally can't pass the ball into the middle third without it being contested, like there's just no hope for them to be able to sustain any sort of possession or any pressure on the opposition. And we saw that from the Wanderers. It wasn't just restricting them to one goal, it was really just about the only chance of the game that the Wanderers had was the one that they scored. And it's just credit to the fact that the fact that the midfield can shut opposition teams down so well that they can't generate any chances, and that's going to serve them well moving forwards. But Auckland is a very different beast entirely, because they kind of play similarly to the Victory insofar as they don't allow teams to generate a lot of chances. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how those front those forward units for both teams operate in this coming game, because if that flexibility might come to help the Victory a little bit, because it's going to give them that something different that Auckland might not be ready for. But no, it was hats off to Dillis, because he coached a very, very good game. I think he nailed the tactics. He got the subs right. He didn't really do anything that seemed stupid or wrong at the time. And yeah, just a clinical game. Really one of the best performances from the Victory so far this season. Given the stakes of everything, you're away to a side in really good form with, what was expected to be a decent crowd. In the end of it was 16,000, something like that.
Yep.
Maybe a little bit below what we would have liked, but it's still a decent crowd, all things considered, and they were able to go and do a performance like that. I think that's testament to the mentality that the squad has. And Arthur Dillis mentioned something in the press conference where he was saying, from now on, it's kill or be killed. And I think that's the sort of mentality that the Victory need to have. They can't be going into these games thinking, oh, well, we're maybe not the best team here, so we're just got to take our luck and play the underdogs. The Victory have never been the underdogs in their entire history. They just can't. They simply cannot allow that to happen this time. And I think it's right that they need to be of that mentality that we can beat anybody when we're on. And like Christian, you said, when they're on, and they look as good as anybody else in the league. So I think that's entirely the right mentality to have. And it seems to have paid dividends so far. So it'll be exciting to see how they do in this semi-final.
I do like that quote, apart from the obvious irony of the fact that next week is the 1 week that you can't completely be killed or kill an opposition.
Because
it's two-legger. But it is a good mentality. And Christian, you mentioned he did have a little bit of a tiff with Alan Stajic on the full-time whistle. I don't think anyone is 100% sure quite what that was about. I think Marco Monteverde was reporting that the last time these teams played, Dillis, after conceding a 2-0 lead to go down 4-2, wasn't quite keen on the pleasantries at the end of the game, and maybe Staj was just reminding him, you're happy to shake hands after a win. But both of the coaches pretty much dismissed it just as some handbags, I think Staj said in the post-game press conference. But an interesting point for him, he's at the end of his 1-year contract, at least that we know publicly. I feel after this Carl Viet debacle, we have to clarify this is what we know publicly after every talk about contract situations. But this loss, it feels like a pretty significant blow for the Wanderers, Christian. Their run without a finals win will extend to a 10th season, which is quite significant. It really felt like this was going to be their year. They had 12 games on the row unbeaten, as we've said. The crowd was up and about. The RBB were up and about. And I just worried just a little bit because they had so much momentum. And I asked myself the question, is the fact that they've had this run enough to keep the growth going for the club into next season, or does this loss kind of knock the wind out of them, knock the momentum out of them? I'm not sure.
It's tough to look at it. I mean, first half of the season, you would have said probably Stajic, it's probably a too big of a job for him to sort of overcome into next season. But given the performances and the results he mustered up, I mean, you've got to give him credit, right? I mean, a lot of pressure from the fans, the media, a lot of external pressure, and for him to come out and have this really good streak of, I forgot how many games unbeaten. I think it was over 10, 12 or something like that.
12,
I think 12, yeah. Surely as a board at the club, you think, okay, maybe there is something to cling on to and build on for next season. Because originally I was shocked that he was only offered a 1-year contract, right? I mean, given Stajic pedigree, in Australian football with, the jobs he's had in the past, I thought, okay, maybe at least a minimum 2-year contract, give him some stability and a bit of faith moving forward instead of, judging him off one season, because you can look at it two ways, right? I mean, yes, they have won a finals game yet again, but at the same time, given how things eventuated, after the halfway point in the season, to turn it around and to get the players on his side and to get to buy into what he wanted to do tactically, given all the outside noise of especially Juan Mata, right? I mean, it was like, oh, where's he going to play? Is he the right fit? I think he's been able to mold all these pieces together, add with a few injuries as well throughout the season. I think, look, give him time, give him another season. I don't know the opinion of RBB fans, of Wanderers fans in general, but I think, just given his experience, I think it wouldn't be a bad idea to, maybe test out at least in the off season, explore your options, and if there's no one better suited out there for the role, then why not give Staj another shot?
Yeah, I think that, look, the back end to the season has been very impressive from him. And I think the biggest compliment that we can pay him is back when we were having this Juan Mata conversation and should he play, and obviously Fahid Ben Kalfala and all the comments he made, was we kind of got to a point where they were losing so much. We kind of put forward two options, as like, you either got to find a way to get Juan Mata into this team regularly, or you got to start winning. And credit to him, they started winning, right? And he did it without the World Cup winner on the field for the majority of the time. Look, I think he's definitely deserved enough for a second season. I think I understand why they gave him a 1-year deal. He's just come off winning the wooden spoon with Perth Glory in quite unceremonious fashion, but he's done a very good job. I think he should get more time, 100%. And then the other question is this the last time we've seen Juan Mata in a Wanderers shirt, Jacob? The strong mail is that they've offered him an extension for another year. There's also some whispers going around that some other A-League clubs have shown interest in him. No, you're shaking your head?
I think other clubs showing interest in him is an insane thing, especially with everything we know about, you know, the APL wanting to reduce the salary cap, and, you know, it's not like he's going to be cheap, and he's not even been on the pitch for half the season. You know, it just boggles the mind that there are other clubs are considering it. I think that's a crazy move. I'd be surprised to see him back in a Wanderers shirt, to be honest. I just don't think he's had the sort of impact that they were hoping for and that they expected from him. And I almost sort of wonder as well, how good could the Wanderers season have been had he not been at the club and not been that distraction to start things off? Because it seemed like that's where a lot of, you know, those poor performances and things were coming from. It was all blowing up over Juan Mata and his inclusion and where he is in the squad, and, you know, what role he needs to play, and sort of, you know, forming tactics around him, before Stadge realised, hang on, actually our best 11 doesn't include him, so we've just got to play our game and we'll be fine. So I almost sort of wonder, you know, could they have made a run for top 2 without him in the first place? I think he's gonzo, to be honest. He had moments where he was fantastic. We saw some great deliveries from him, some good free kicks and things like that. But yeah, I just don't think he's been able to have the impact that a player of sort of his stature and the expectation that was on his shoulders coming in as well. I don't think it's lived up to it. So, you know, as disappointing as that is, that's the reality of these big marquee signings in the A-League. It's, you know, very seldom do they come off in spades, like a Del Piero, or even, like you could say, a Douglas Costa has been pretty fantastic for Sydney this season. But Juan Mata just hasn't had that impact. So yeah, it's disappointing, but it is what it is. And I think that the Wanderers, you know, maybe they're realizing that, hang on, we're going to be better off without him, because he's just been on the bench now. He's getting very limited minutes and not having an impact when he comes on the pitch. So I think moving forwards, they need to look at, you know, here's our best 11. We need to get pieces in that's going to complement that and not, you know, cause a distraction. And, you know, I think that Juan Mata, especially at the start of the season, was that distraction, unfortunately. But yeah, I don't think he'll be back at the Wanderers. I don't think he should be, at least. I don't think they should be considering him. And the fact that other A-League clubs are considering him, like I said, I think that's crazy. You just have to look at the season that he's had where he's not been on the pitch. You can't think this is going to be a good investment, a good spend of money. Clubs are in so much financial strife at the moment that they're playing kids because they have to. And it's like, yeah, let's sign this guy who is going to be like one of the highest paid players in the league, and he's not going to see half of the minutes of this season. Like, that's a crazy thought to me. I don't know what they're thinking there.
I think it's got to be Stadge's call, right? Like, this kind of recruitment happens over a long period of time. Stadge was only in for a year, came in at the start of this season. I think it's clear that there was a bigger voice in terms of determining whether Juan Mata would come to the club or not. And obviously, Stadge's opinion was that he was not part of the best 11. So if there is a future for Juan Mata at the Western Sydney Wanderers, I think it needs to be Stadge's decision if he is going to be the coach moving forward. Finally, on this game, I want to say one more thing, and that is that it is absolutely disgraceful that we're playing finals football on a pitch like it was at Parramatta Stadium. It was completely torn up. Players were slipping all over the place. I've got a hint of a feeling that Mata miss right at the end that went blasted over, I had a look at the replay. I think there's a slight bobble. Maybe that's me being generous, but the pitch was clearly very difficult to work. And I mean, this is finals football. You can't play the kind of football that we want to on a pitch like that. So I know there's a much, much bigger conversation there, but I'll just leave it at a little complaint. But to segue nicely into Friday night on a stadium sense, Christian, I'm kind of glad Western are playing City in the semi-finals because it means Tarneit is not an option, is not an appropriate venue for finals football, and we won't have to see it there anymore because to only have, 3,500 in, it's a training facility at the end of the day, right? And I know Robbie was having a bit of a chat on the resurrected A-League off air this morning, just about like the fact that they've got one road in, like it's just not a stadium, it's not a football stadium, and we knew that, but that's not where we should be showcasing the highlight of our season.
Yeah, I agree. I heard comments from Vince Rigari. He appeared on Offsiders on ABC on Sunday, and he had some good things to say. He was like essentially saying, Western United, yes, the crowd wasn't convincing, 3,000 couldn't even sell out, the stadium for a elimination final. But look, at the same time, you have to commend them for their project, right? The pitch was in good condition, unlike the Wanderers, for example, where you've got to share the stadium with NRL, for example. Yeah. So I guess that's the pros and cons of it. And Western United are looking to the future, not having to share stadiums with rival codes, having the pitch to themselves. Like, at least they've got this vision, right, moving forward. But I think the ultimate goal, obviously, is to get more fans in attendance, right? That's sort of, the whole reason of why, they've obviously established this project. They want to help grow the club into this new direction, onto the next level. So I think, like I said, it's got pros and cons to it, but very thankful that it's at AAMI Park because it's obviously more suited to this type of, game between another Melbourne team in City. Hopefully generates a good atmosphere. And it should be a good tie overall.
I think, as we've said consistently over the now 18 months and 200 episodes of this show, the long-term project of Western United, if it gets there, has to be praised, and hopefully this new ownership is a boost to that as well. But in the short term, quite clearly and obviously not ideal. But the game itself, Jacob, 3-2 win to Western United, kicks out Adelaide United from the final series. It's funny, just the way that Adelaide qualified for this final series, even when Jovanovic opens the scoring within the first few minutes. I'm just sitting there going, this does not change my opinion in one bit as to how this match is going to turn out. Adelaide United can score an early goal, and we know their record. It's still going to be a close game, right? It's not like they're going to run away with it. And it was a close game in the end. Obviously, Noah Botic's hat-trick, we've talked about that. And Stefan Mork giving them a little bit of a runway towards a comeback for the final 13 or 14 minutes, but it's not to be.
No, it's funny when Jovanovic scored because everybody, I think, in Adelaide was probably going, well, that means that this side has to now try and defend for 90 minutes. And it's like, that's probably just not going to happen. Like you said, it was kind of an inevitability that there were going to be a lot of goals and it was going to be a close game. But, I think that Western were just by far the better team on the day. And that's about as simple as it gets in finals football. Yes, the scoreline was close, but I don't think that, the Western were under as much threat of losing that game as it might have seemed if you just look at the scoreline. They were in complete control, especially out of possession, going man for man in the midfield with a good press. Adelaide had no answers. It was, pass the ball into the pivot player, he was immediately pressed, pass it back to the centre-back, he was pressed, centre-back would pass it to the keeper, who would then just kick it out for a throw-in. And it was just like that all game long, and, they executed their plan perfectly, and Adelaide had no answers. So, credit to, we spoke about John Aloisi earlier, credit to him for setting up his side in that way and identifying that Adelaide are not going to be able to pass their way through teams if you press them. And, it's something that I think actually that's something that has coincided with Adelaide's dip in form. His team sort of figured them out a little bit and realised what their weakness was in possession, and Western just amplifying that in this game and doing a really good job of it. And then Noah Botic, his class and his quality coming through to give them the edge. But overall, can't say anybody would have been too surprised with the result that Western managed to go through. A very, very good game from them, and it was just another case of Adelaide not quite being up to standard in this back half of the season compared to where they were early on. And for that instance, it's a little bit disappointing that Carl Viet goes out on a loss in that fashion as well. He was going out on a win at home, and now he's going out on a loss in an elimination final because they managed to sneak in. But that's that time to reset for next season. And Western, we're talking about their project, at least off the field. On the field, they're absolutely nailing it at the moment. They've had great recruitment. They seem to have things right this season. And, obviously there's no guarantees that the squad is going to look anything similar to what it is at the moment next season. Obviously, Noah Botic, the most likely of those to leave, and he's been one of their key players. But their window is well and truly open right now. And I think that if they play their football, I think that, again, like a bit like a Victory, that there's every chance that they can make a go of this. And where what you're going to get from City and Auckland, I think Western and Victory offer a bit of a wild card perhaps, and they have that potential to just do something and pull something out of nowhere, whether it's a Noah Botic hat-trick, whether it's Ibasuki coming on with a goal in the last minute, or Abel Wallity with a blazing run up the wing or something like that, right? They've just got those sorts of players in their squad that can make a difference. So yeah, I'm rooting for them because I really want them to do well. I think that they've got some great players. John Aloisi is a fantastic coach, and they deserve it after all the struggles they've had recently. I want to see them have a good run.
Of course, on the Adelaide United side of things as well, it was also the final game for Isaias and Javi Lopez as well, two of the great A-League imports into the A-League. That will be their final game in Adelaide United colours. It's funny, Christian, the goals that they conceded as well, and we talked about this in the way that Botic scored them, but just like classic deflections off legs, backed, missed balls, tackles with like limbs going everywhere. It was really kind of chaos in the Adelaide defensive side of things, and Botic was there to pounce on all of them. And really, on the balance of play, it felt like Western deserved this probably a little bit more than what a 3-2 scoreline would have suggested, and that's massive for them. They continue their undefeated record in elimination finals, and obviously now get to set up this semi-final against Melbourne City.
Yeah, I guess story of the game was whose defence was worse, right? And ultimately it was Adelaide's, and that's sort of been the storyline for them basically the whole season. That's been their Achilles heel. They haven't been able to sort that issue out at the back, and ultimately it cost them. I mean, some of those goals that Botic was able to score, I mean, the ball sort of bouncing everywhere, no communication, no cohesion, no shape even at times for Adelaide at the back, and even, in the midfield. It's like you've done so well to get to this point to finals. You shouldn't even be there in the first place. Sydney should have taken 1 point in their last 2 games. You're there, yes, okay, you deserve to be there. I'm not going to say you're not, but at least try and rectify some of your mistakes, heading into it. Don't do the same thing over and over again. And essentially that's what they've done, right? They've sort of played it into West United's hands. Because I said coming in, I said that for Adelaide, West United would be their best matchup. I thought this is a real possibility that they could advance and go through, right? Just because of the matchup, the styles of play, this sort of back and forth type of football. But yeah, look, I think West United, they had Noah Botic up front who was able to, finish off those chances. And that was basically the clinical difference, right, between the two sides. Yeah. And look, obviously Adelaide are going to have this sort of rebuild now in the off-season. Be interesting to go where they go in terms of, the new manager and, the players they decide to bring in and shift out. So, I mean, a lot of questions. But, in terms of the game, I think Adelaide sort of shot themselves in the foot a bit in terms of the goals they conceded, and should have probably still been in the game. In terms of it should have been level, or they could have even been in front, right? But I think West United thoroughly, I guess, deserved the win, and we'll be looking ahead to City and hopefully pulling off another scalper there.
Yep. All right. So Western United and Melbourne Victory advance. Adelaide United and Western Sydney are out. Melbourne City will take on Western United. Both legs will be played at AAMI Park, thank God. How are we feeling still about the quality of City? We'll preview these games in a little bit more depth on Friday, Jacob. But in terms of that matchup, the first leg will be on Friday night at 7:35 p.m. As I said, at AAMI Park, Melbourne City versus Western. This makes a little bit of a mockery out of the 2-legged format. Having both games at AAMI Park is a little bit disappointing, but as we say, probably better than out at Tunneat.
Yeah, although I don't think that the crowds are necessarily going to be any better at AAMI Park, and the pitch
they'll be better than 3.5.
Only simply because it's City that also plays 2 Melbourne teams that are playing.
Yeah.
You might get 5.5, but it's going to be weird to see both legs played in the same stadium. technically no home advantage though. It's both teams are playing in the same place. City they're a weird one, right? Because they've just sort of had a quiet season in a way, right? They've not done anything flashy. There's not been any of those results that have made you scratch your head or go crazy. They've just sort of done a job and they've ended up second. They skip that first week of finals football and they get a semi-final and sort of don't quite know what to think of them, to be honest. Like I was saying, I think that Western have, those wildcard players and those aces up their sleeves, whereas City, it's just sort of like, they've just got to do a job. I think if they can put in a professional performance, be mature, not make mistakes, that sort of thing, then I think it puts them in good stead. But it's just very difficult to predict what it's going to look like for them because they've had different issues all season long, whether it's been goal scoring or discipline or injuries or whatever. But now it's finals time, and you simply can't allow yourself to have any issues, or you're going to lose a game. And while it's double leg, you don't want to go into the second leg with a deficit and make life difficult for yourself. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. I think that City are my favourites, I think, to win this one, just because I back them more to be able to put in a mature performance and not make mistakes. Whereas I think we did see some mistakes from Western against Adelaide, especially in transition. But like I said, I think Western just have the more firepower than City do, and that might actually come to their aid in this fixture.
Well, Stadia is a very unique part of this year's final series, and it becomes even more interesting when we look at the other leg, which is Auckland v Victory, which both teams, despite being 1v5 on the ladder, will theoretically be playing for a home, in quotation marks, grand final, because you have obviously Auckland top, have the right if they win the game, but Melbourne Victory, knowing that Western and City are on the other side of the bracket, if they win this tie, well, then they might not be the designated home team, but they're going to be playing at AAMI Park where they're going to outnumber both of the potential opposition. So it's this really unique scenario, Christian, where I'm not sure. Just the grand final, it's run by the APL. It's not like club banners and signage and everywhere, right? So as much as the home advantage is for Melbourne City or Western United, it would be perhaps even more so for Melbourne Victory. And of course, they're coming up against a very stern test in Auckland FC, whose coach Steve Corica has quite impressively just collected a clean sweep of all of the Coach of the Month awards throughout this A-League season. He's won every single one of them, so congratulations to him. But his Auckland team have been immense this season, and we've kind of talked about it's been a recurring theme in the fact that defence, who can defend better, is the team to win a lot of these matches. Well, Auckland have set themselves up. Obviously, their average age is a lot older. That's a unique part that we've probably undersold so far this season. But the fact that they have such experience in defence to partner with the quality going forward means they're very often able to shut out games.
Yeah, I know Jacob's a tactical expert, but I think this game is going to be such a good tactical matchup. It sort of takes me back to last season when Victory played Wellington, and it was just so close for those whole two legs, went into extra time. I think it's going to be that sort of occasion where it's going to be a bit of cat and mouse. Both teams are going to be a bit conservative to start off, and then, as the tie progresses, you're going to see, I guess, a bit more attacking football start to play out. And obviously it depends, who's in front, who's behind, who has to take the initiative. I think, it's going to be very close because, as we mentioned before, right, Arthur Dillis seems to have, really, I guess, sorted out his tactical side of the game. Jacob mentioned before, it's taken him a few games just to settle in and see, okay, who are the players I've got at my disposal? Who can I count on? And I think, obviously on the other side now with Steve Corica, he's essentially been doing that the whole season, right, with Auckland, where they've just been a steam train, just winning basically nearly every single game. They've just been really dominant and consistent. So I think, expecting definitely a close tie. If there's anything else, then I'm going to be extremely shocked. So, really looking forward to it, and especially the second leg, being at Auckland, another really good turnout in terms of crowd numbers we're going to expect. So, it's going to be very intriguing, that's for sure.
Yeah, going to be a great occasion. I think I'm with you. A tight affair across the two legs. What should be
legs. Like 5-0 or something?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it always could be counted. But I think a tight, close affair between these two sides is the likely outcome. As I say, more in-depth previews of the first leg of these semi-finals coming up on Friday's episode. Jacob, you mentioned it earlier. I had to bring it up again. Paramount Plus released their Team of the Year, which is indexed based on the Paramount Plus Player Index, which, to be fair, has improved from its debut season last campaign, which seemed to just put both goalkeepers at the top of the list no matter what. But it's still got a little bit of ways to go. And this is no disrespect to any of the 11 that were chosen in this team, but Beach, Truan, Grozos and Atkinson, then O'Shea, Bratton, Alagic and Caceres in midfield, with Mai, Lolly and Milanovic in the front three. I don't know about you guys. I probably have definitely...
like 2 or 3 of those players.
2 or 3 maybe in my team.
I mean, for starters, the algorithm, if you're picking a Brisbane player, then the algorithm doesn't mean anything, surely. No disrespect, but come on, man. To have O'Shea in there, come on.
I think Milanovic definitely.
Milanovic.
And then you can make arguments maybe for the likes of Joe Lolly, Guillermo Mai, maybe Anthony Caceres.
See, I'd put Alagic above Caceres. Maybe that's just my Adelaide bias kicking in there, but I think that he's had a very good season in an underperforming side, so I kind of, I think he's sort of Ryan Teague light in a way, which is surprising he's not in there. How is Bratton in over Ryan Teague,
There's so many, and we'll do a team of the season in a couple of weeks' time, but I think we just wanted to kind of poke fun at that a little bit. But we'll move on. Of course, before we get to the semi-final second legs on the weekend, we have the small matter of the Australia Cup playoffs, which are taking place in Darwin in midweek. Obviously, a little bit of a shift up to last year's schedule, but I think the dominating storyline out of this, Christian, is that for Michael Valkanis, this will be his first game as head coach of the Brisbane Roar. And we have a good piece coming out on Ramble Australia sometime on Tuesday. I'm not going to promise an exact hour at this point in time, but talking about him and what he looks to bring as the new coach of the Roar. They play the Phoenix on Wednesday nights. The Mariners and the Glory are on Tuesday. Both games kick off at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Australian time. I guess both of these games, the teams, they probably don't really want to be there, to be honest. They've obviously come off poor seasons. That's why they're there. But especially for Brisbane, just a chance to kind of impress the new coach and kind of set the tone for what people will remember you as we go into the off-season.
Yeah, I think for Valkanis in particular, I think this game comes at a much needed time, right? He's just arrived at the club. He can use this match, albeit, yes, they don't want to be there, but look, he can analyse the players and see, okay, what are the players I've got? What do I need? How can I improve on this squad? Because it's going to need a lot of drastic changes, that's for sure, from, the football that we saw, through large parts this season. But, Valkanis has had quite a journey, right? From memory, it was only about 12 months ago he was coaching in Israel, and then because of the war, he had to jump ship. I believe went to Ajax as an assistant coach under John Van Skip, former coach here in the A-League. So, yeah, he's been around a bit. And I think with already his experience now heading into this Brisbane Roar side, I think Brisbane have been lacking that sort of type of coach, right? They've sort of gone down the path of let's try and get a sort of youngish coach in, Ross Aloisi, get some new ideas across. But maybe Valkanis is someone who they need, right, to really stamp their authority, say, this is how it's going to go, get that real mongrel in them, because that's the type of player I remember him when at his time at Adelaide United, Valkanis. He was sort of that in-your-face sort of player, and I think that sort of resonated and translated into his coaching position. So, yeah, it could be a much-needed change for Brisbane.
Very different opinion as Paletti to what they had on Michael Valkanis' appointment, but will be interesting to see.
I think it's good though to have gotten him in immediately so that he's got the chance to play this playoff game and assess heading into the off season where the squad is at, rather than coming in at the start of the off season and being right. Well, I've not actually got any chances to evaluate these players myself. How do I know what pieces I need and don't need and things like that? So I think that's a smart move from Brisbane, and I think pretty much across the league now it's becoming a thing where the earlier you can get a coach in, the better, and clubs are realising that now. So hopefully it all pans out well for them, because they've been much maligned recently. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see, because his record doesn't, as Paletti mentioned last episode, doesn't inspire a lot of confidence.
Just while we're on Brisbane as well, I can tell you a little bit of mail that we're getting in terms of the Perry Park situation. My understanding is that talks between the club and Football Queensland and the state government have continuing and intensifying as well. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll have a little bit more to say on that. But the other news, just in terms of the Australia Cup playoffs, is that Wellington have confirmed that Scott Wooten and Sam Sutton will depart the club after this playoff. So they're getting a little goodbye run in Darwin, which is an extremely opposite climate to what you find in Wellington a lot of the time. But the strong rumour is that they're off to Perth for the next A-League season as well. The other football on at the weekend is, of course, the A-League Women's Grand Final, which is really exciting. And we couldn't go, of course, we leave the bulk of the women's football to Paletti and Burke on the Dubcast. They do a great job. They follow that league inside and out and give you the best detailed analysis, more than what we could do. But we can't skip over this City Mariners semi-final. If you hadn't seen, a brain fade of a red card took Melbourne City down to 10 players early in the second tie. That was tied at 2-2 on aggregate after the first leg. And they held on at 0-0 all the way until the 121st minute, where Isabel Gomez, in a clear offside position, tucked home the winner. It was admitted by both coaches after the game that it was clearly an offside goal. And Christian, even more brutally, this is what has brought Melbourne City's invincible season to an end.
It's crazy, right? I mean, we only had the one camera angle. I was saying to you guys off air, like, did you see another angle to see maybe is there a smidget of a chance that it could be onside? But apparently that was the only angle. So to go out on such a low, having this invincible season, not losing a game, and then to have that happen to you. I mean, look, they were so resilient, right? To get that red card, it was after 30 minutes in the game, and which was City's, undoing, to be fair. Ill discipline from Lourdes getting the straight red card. But yeah, it just shows that VAR is essentially needed. It's just about the finances and being able to fund it. And so it's just this whole opens up this can of worms, right, as to, can the dub afford it? When's the right season to implement it? All these processes have to go in place, because you get instances like these, which, look, essentially ruin the game, right? I mean, like that
ruin a season.
Should have been, it should have went to penalties, and that can cost a team, their whole season, like you said. So, just unfortunate that that's happening in that way.
Yeah, and look, it could cost them the treble as well, which would be devastating. Listen to the Dubcast that comes out on Wednesday morning. Paletti and Burke are going to talk a lot about that. It is a resource issue. Do you, if you had the money for it, do you want to bring in VAR? Do you want to actually pay your players for 12 months of the year? There's obviously a lot of other competing priorities there, but go listen to the Dubcast, of course, ahead of the grand final on Sunday afternoon, which will be hosted at AAMI Park. It's a triple header on the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, bang, bang, bang. Of course, the Melbourne Victory taking on the Central Coast Mariners. Let's go international just to finish us off coaching-wise, because Ange Postecoglou has become the first Australian and Greek-born manager to make a European final. Jacob, I know slightly conflicting views here, us being Arsenal supporters, but we'll just purely keep our Australian hats on here. Just an extraordinary achievement from someone who, the opposition that they're going to go up against, Manchester United, has been intertwined consistently throughout Postecoglou's career. Shout out to Lachie Flanagan, who I saw post about this on X. In 2000, as South Melbourne boss, he took on Manchester United in the Club World Cup, which was the first team of European, descent, location. I struggled for the right word there, that he played against of that opposition. And in 2023, Christian, Manchester United was the first team where Ange Postecoglou beats in the Premier League, got his first Premier League victory. And then in 2025, faces them in a Europa League final and is 90 minutes away from ending Tottenham's 17-year wait for a major trophy. It really is quite the momentous occasion.
That quote is going to pop off, right? It's going to become famous when he said, I always win trophies in my second season. If he's able to pull this off, that is just going to be so cold. I mean, I guess, against Manchester United, it's just going to be a case of like who wants him more, because they both have basically the same motive to make Champions League football. They've both had really bad seasons. I think 16th and 17th place on the table. And then there's been discussions in England about, should the winner of the Europa League go into the Champions League? Like, do they deserve it? But I think to Andrew's point in his press conferences, I mean, it's a different tournament, right? It's people trying to take away something from Tottenham yet again. Like when Andrew said, when we finished top 5 last season, people said that was such a disappointment, and now they've made a Europa League final. They're still trying to make excuses. But I mean, from an Aussie perspective, we just hope that he's able to cross that line, because as we know, he's got, Nick Montgomery, Mile Jedinak in there in the coaching staff. So even for them, it'd be such a surreal experience for them to win that type of trophy. European silverware doesn't come quite often, especially when you're Tottenham. So hopefully they're able to get past United, because, it'd be such a great story for Australian football.
Jacob, can you will yourself to support Ange in the final?
Unfortunately not. But it was funny because Paletti said in a group chat when we were discussing this, country before club. And I was like, yeah, and I'm English first. So, it still applies. Having an Australian lead Tottenham to a European trophy would be a disaster. But I will say there is absolutely zero doubt in my mind, like, Tottenham are winning this game. I just it's one of those things. I just feel it. I don't like to be, that sort of a person where I'm, predicting results like that, but it just feels like it's going to happen. I don't know why. Everything is adding up. This whole thing about him always winning trophies in his second year. Yeah. It's like, he just does, right? That's just what happens. And it's like the fact that they're having such a terrible season, but they're going to win a European trophy and then qualify for Champions League through that. Like, it's all just adding up to be just, of course that's what's going to happen. And it's like, they're playing against Man United. It's just, they are going to get the job done.
They haven't beaten United. That's the point as well. I think it's like 3 or 4 games United have beaten Tottenham this season. So I don't know. Is there that psychological edge?
But not in Bilbao though. Final. Haven't played him in Bilbao.
It's a final as well. Like, that'll just.
United have played in Bilbao before, and they absolutely wiped the floor with them 3-0 in the first leg. So they're familiar with it. Who knows?
There you go.
Know the pitch.
Yeah.
I know this is controversial, but I can't help watching Ange at Tottenham, even as an Arsenal fan, and supporting him. Apart from the North London derby, you won't get me that far. But go well, Ange. Hope you can bring it home.
I will say I do support him insofar as I think that a lot of the negativity that he's faced from the fan base and from the media is entirely unjustified and unwarranted. I think that's been absolutely insane, and watching that unfold, honestly, I find myself watching his press conferences and going, I'm actually backing you here, mate. Like, I kind of like what you're saying, and that you're standing
the
up for
English
yourself.
Press is going to lose their heads if he wins
if he wins it, yeah. And in some ways it might actually be a bad thing for him if he does, because they're going to be on him about it forever. Why'd you perform so poorly in the league this season then? And then it's like, well, now you've got to go and do that again next season, and it's like, it's just going to open up a whole can of worms for him.
It's going to be crazy. The other coaching news we have for you is that Graham Arnold is officially the new boss of the Iraqi men's national team. Now, I think we talked about this rumour last week, but the news is official. He's got 2 games left in phase 3 of World Cup qualification. His contract runs through to the next Asian Cup, but it is cancelled if he doesn't make this World Cup in North America. So Iraq are 3rd in Group B, 1 point outside of automatic qualification, but they play both teams above them in the next window. So they do have qualification in their own hands, playing Jordan and South Korea in the final window. But that is a tough test. But if he doesn't make it, they look pretty good to go into the 4th phase, which they will be one of the favoured teams to go through. So Christian, he's got another gig. I don't think anyone was quite expecting it to come in that neck of the woods, but he's off, and so is Robbie Stanton as well. He's taking the former Jets boss with him.
Yeah, well, we were discussing when he left the Socceroos, Arnold was saying that he wanted some time off to reflect and just have some downtime, right? We saw, his stint with the Rabbitohs as this goalkeeping coach, whatever that role was there, trying to get himself away from football for a bit. And obviously now he's received this offer from Iraq. He thinks, okay, it's the right option for him in this moment of time. Obviously in his mind, he thinks this is very achievable. If they don't automatically qualify, they go into the next round where, they get another chance at it. So, I mean, look, good on him. I think he's obviously taken his leap of faith. Not easy to go to sort of a foreign national team, as a ruck who, look, I'm assuming that he doesn't know too much about, right? Maybe the past couple of weeks, obviously, he's been studying the players, tactically how they've gone about it over, the course of their history. But look, I just hope he does well throughout the qualification phase. And we have another Aussie representing at the World Cup in the USA, Canada and Mexico next year.
Just don't let him come up against Australia, Jacob. That would be horrible.
It's going to happen, isn't it? But I find it, I think it's strange he's gone just straight back into international management.
Yeah.
I thought maybe he might reevaluate it and go, actually, I prefer club football and that's where I think I'm best suited. But all the best to him. And if it comes up against Australia, that's the headlines write themselves, right? I mean, it's going to be so funny if that happens.
Yeah. The cynical view is obviously if it's taken this long, then how much interest was there? Because it felt like there was a clear indication that he wanted to go back to club football.
But also, it was like Christian was saying, it was a clear indication from him as well that he wanted time off.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's, if it's during that time off, he's like, I'm not even going to look. I'm not even going to be open to any offers. It's all like, don't even contact me sort of thing, like completely isolationist. Then maybe that kind of explains the length of, the wait.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. All right. Good luck to him. Hopefully he does well. Obviously not to the detriment of the Socceroos. But that will do for this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. 200 episodes down. Hopefully many more to go. Christian Montegan, thank you.
Thank you, Lockie.
Jacob Stevens, cheers.
Thank you very much, Lockie. We
will be back on Friday to preview our first leg of the two semi-finals, there we go, in the A-League men's competition. We're building up to the climax of the season now. Very important games coming up on the weekend. Thank you all very much for listening at home. We appreciate your company. Goodbye.